Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Finance. Does he stand by his statement that determining who is foreign for the purposes of restricting residential property ownership by foreign speculators is a swamp?
The Honourable Bill English.
Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why has he ruled out restricting the purchase of existing homes to New Zealand citizens and residents, given that Australia, Canada and Singapore have all enacted such policies or similar restrictions? Or is it that these successful nations are just xenophobic?
Honourable Bill English.
No, Mr Speaker, I'd note that all of them have more intensive house price cycles than we do, for a start. And secondly, actually, observation of those systems shows just how difficult it is to determine and enforce this type of measure. But you know, we're gradually picking our way through the swamp.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Is he aware that the state of Victoria, Australia, now has a jail sentence for foreign speculators who wrought their home ownership rules? And given that ANZ data shows that in New South Wales and Victoria, foreign speculators account for between 25% and 30% of purchases, why has he repeatedly refused to even collect the data here?
Honourable Bill English, either of those two supplementaries.
Mr Speaker, I think the member has just highlighted the problem. They've had rules in Australia that foreigners can't buy existing houses, and they've got data that shows that 35% of house sales are to foreign buyers. The reason they're bringing in prison sentences is because they haven't been able to enforce the law. And now they're trying to scare the wits out of foreigners who have been getting around the law on a large scale.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why does his speculator-friendly government deny that demand pressure caused by property speculation is contributing to skyrocketing house prices in Auckland, when the Reserve Bank thinks that speculation-driven demand is a threat to financial stability? Or are they wrong too?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, in fact, the government set up a memorandum of understanding with the Reserve Bank, which was is enforcing macroprudential measures in a way that they're not doing in Australia, and with some success. So the government keeps an eye on how these other jurisdictions are dealing with the pressure of overseas capital. Looking at those systems shows how complex it is, and that's why we're picking our way carefully through the swamp.
Question number 6. Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister rule out selling state houses, such as those that are soon to be on the block in Invercargill and Tauranga and elsewhere, to non-resident foreign buyers?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, we haven't put in any such rule, but they would have to register. They'd have to be registered as a community housing provider, and as far as we know, there are none of that sort that have registered. But we're very pleased to be able to proceed with those transactions because we think we can get a better deal for tenants and the opportunity for those communities to redevelop parts of their housing stock, which they all, except for the Greens and the Labor Party, everyone else in New Zealand thinks we can do a better job with state housing.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister then confirm that he intends to place no restrictions at all on a non-resident foreign buyer organisation registering as a community housing provider in New Zealand for the purposes of purchasing the state housing?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, there aren't restrictions. Just in the same way as in our register of charities, we don't restrict global lobby groups like Greenpeace, who are another foreign multinational who try and impose their views on New Zealand.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister rule out state houses that are sold by this government, such as those in Invercargill and Tauranga, being sold on at a later date and not, therefore, being used for social housing?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no. Not only are we not ruling it out, we don't want to rule it out, because part of the thing that needs to change in our state housing, and if the Greens might have missed this, the population is different than it was in 1950, when we built thousands of three-bedroomed houses for two-parent households with 3 to 5 children. Now, a quarter of all New Zealand children are born into a sole-parent household. The fastest-growing category of households in New Zealand is the single-person household. And the Greens and the Labour Party are the only ones who seem to think that that bit of New Zealand life should be frozen in 1950. We disagree, and we're proud to disagree, and we're going to make rules that ensure it changes.
Point of order, sir.
Order. Point of order, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table a letter to Housing New Zealand tenants dated 6 May 2015, which assures them they will remain in social housing.
Leave us not to table that particular letter. Is there any objection? There is no objection. It can be tabled. Question number 6, Clayton Mitchell.